You're not you when you're hungry. She laughed, tossing me the Halloween miniature. Grinning, I ripped off the wrapper and downed it in 2 bites. I couldn't help myself. There wasn't anything that girl could toss at me that I wouldn't take a bite of. Especially when she threw me that wicked smile of hers. It's crazy how quickly it can all come rushing back to you. Half a decade had passed since I had last seen Annie, and yet all it took was another October night, another baby candy bar, and suddenly I was dopily, hopelessly, and pointlessly in love all over again. Transported, transformed, all of a single fun-sized hit of chocolate and caramel. You're not you in the nighttime. Red sky, setting sun, rising moon. The twilight of another day and another year. The kids were venturing out into the streets in their costumes now. They scampered from door to door, grabbing candy, trying to scare each other, cosplaying their chosen alternative identities. The night was bringing out something new and something different in each of them. This was Annie's favorite holiday. It was so easy to remember her tonight. Her cut-off jeans and her too dark eyeliner, her wallet on a chain and the tattoo her father didn't know about peeking out of her tank top. With her, every day had been a little like Halloween. I breathed in the falling night and let the wind take the candy wrapper from my fingers. I laced up my shoes, stretched a little, and set off on my evening run. You're not you when you run. I waved at the candy-gathering kids as I passed, and they waved back, their energy contagious. Within just a block or two, I felt my breathing and heartbeat all sync up together, like tumblers in a lock. I was keyed up, and my mind and eyes opened wide in that way that only happens when I run, and maybe when I dream. I get all my best thinking done this way. It's a meditative state, quite literally. I often finish my run with the same sense of self-collection and processed subconsciousness that I sometimes get from a good night's sleep. It's addictive. Tonight, I found my subconscious continuing to process old memories of Annie. How, I wondered, had she come to dominate my thoughts tonight, out of the blue like this? She had never been a runner herself, not in the sports sense, but we'd done a lot of running together even so. We'd done a lot of sprinting, mostly from one hiding place to the next. We'd run plenty of races, usually with various authority figures, mall cops, teachers, or worst of all, her utterly terrifying father. She had been the absolute best at finding shadowy corners that no one else would ever notice. Sometimes the danger we hid from had been imaginary, just the product of a teenage drive for adventure, and other times it had been much too real. But somehow, it had always been a laugh afterwards. God, I miss her. You're not you when you're alone. The suburbs dropped behind me now. There was an unmaintained and abandoned exit ramp, and I ran down it. The pavement turned to gravel beneath my sneakers, and fall-colored trees shrouded the highway from view. Weeds and weather were getting the best of the pavement here, and my pace adapted to the sketchy terrain. A quarter mile down, the road dead-ended into a wooden fence and a wall of brambles, but a worn dirt path showed where others had made a habit of climbing over. Here, the city was only an ambient glow in the distance, and the night sounds, the crickets and frogs, were no longer interrupted by passing engines and music. I was the sole occupant and de facto ruler of the night now, at least as far as my eyes could see anyways. Pure freedom washed over me, and I let out a wolf howl just because I could. I pulled my shirt off, enjoying the shivering sensation of the cool air on my bare chest. I threw a quick suspicious glance around at the horizon and ignored the brief temptation to strip off completely. Streaking was more Annie's speed, the kind of shenanigans she might tell me about, but never invite me on. I was her tame, boring friend, always just a little jealous of her reckless nerve. But I hadn't believed most of the rumors that had circulated about her when she had disappeared. Her parents had divorced, and her father had won sole custody. Her father, the fastidiously respectable and untouchable pillar of the community, with a brutal side that he hid from almost everyone. I couldn't imagine living with him as my only parent, and neither could Annie, apparently. Some said that she had run away from home. Some said her dad put her in a psych ward. And others said she had been sent to juvie, then run away from that. I knew only that one day she was gone. She hadn't shared any plans with me or said goodbye. The only clue I had was the very last text she ever sent me. Do you ever feel like the world is peeling away in front of you? Like old paint off an old wall? That's what this feels like. But it's not just the paint peeling off. The wall is coming away with it, and so is the house, and the ground, and the sky, and the universe are all peeling, and what's been hiding underneath it all is so much wilder than I ever imagined. That's what I'm like right now. Things are changing, and I'm changing, and more later. Talk soon. I replied many times over the next few months, but she never responded to me, or to anybody else. That had been 5 years ago. We'd been close, or at least I thought so. Over the years we had absorbed each other's personalities. We quoted all the same movies, watched all the same TV shows, used all the same catchphrases. In a way, we started to become each other. But she had been gone so long now that her soul had begun to leach back out of mine. Alone, without her constantly provoking my tame self to find its wild side, my life had become more and more normal. I'd finished high school, done some college, and was even close to completing my degree. I'd gotten an apartment. I paid bills. Without Annie in my life, I had turned into just another citizen. And yet here I was on Halloween night, stripped to the waist, vaulting over a fence and trespassing for no better reason than it was something that she would have done. There were still and always would be pieces of my soul stamped with her initials. You're not you when you're afraid. As I moved into the forest, putting more distance between myself and civilization, all I felt was good. Trail running is so much cooler than road running. Leaping over roots, pushing off boulders, splashing through creeks that kept weaving across my path. I was in good shape, and my body felt strong, powerful, and eager for the miles. There were dogs howling in the distance, and I was just another wild thing racing through the night. Like any skilled predator, they never let me feel afraid until I was surrounded. One minute, I was superhumanly confident, a jungle demigod, and the next, I was an incredibly moronic, half-naked city kid who had gotten himself lost in the woods at midnight, and was now surrounded by big black shadows with low-slung, streamlined bodies and feral eyes, all muscle, fur, and fangs. These weren't farm dogs, not by a long shot. The leap I had been about to attempt across the stream would have run me right into it. A giant silver wolf, suddenly in plain sight, glaring down at me from atop the other side of the creek bed. I danced backwards, sucked in my breath, knee-deep in cold, muddy water. A glance behind showed that the path that way was blocked as well. Several more dark shapes had appeared out of the trees that I had jogged past just a few seconds ago. Low, earnest profanity spilled out of me in a tiny, helpless whisper. I was an idiot, and I was going to die. The lead monster snuffled along the water's edge, never taking its eyes off me. They were cold, cruel eyes that reduced me to 170 pounds of raw, frightened meat, without a soul or personality. It dipped a paw in the water, as if deciding whether or not I was worth getting wet for. Fear changes you. It floods your bladder with fluid, and your brain with exotic hormones. Hours worth of thoughts explode through your mind in seconds. Some say that in the instant before your death, you can relive your entire life. The lead wolf made up its mind and plunged down into the creek, its eyes still locked on mine. As terror spiked in my brain, all I thought of was Annie. It was a pure, wordless flood. No specific memories, just her. Her essence, her soul, her self. The memories that had been stalking me all night, all boiled down into a single, compressed sensation. It was as if she were there with me, closer than we had ever been in real life, closer than holding hands or hugging or making out. She was inside me, one soul overlaid on top of another. As the creature sprang, its forepaws leaving the water, moonlit droplets glittered behind. I felt pure warmth and pure horror. And then Annie was there, in the flesh, stripped to the waist just like me, crashing into my body, throwing her arms around me. I fell backwards into the creek, bashing my elbow and tailbone onto the rocks as she came tumbling down on top of me, her spluttering, explosive, epically familiar, and way too good to be true laughter rocking through the forest. On the creek bed above us, half a dozen wolves sat back on their haunches, eyes half closed and tongues hanging out, looking for all the world like they were laughing along with her. I guess I started laughing too. I mean, what else was there to do? I sat there in the icy creek, soaked in mud and pee, at midnight on Halloween, surrounded by wolves, with my long-lost and completely unreciprocated half-naked crush as we laughed our freaking heads off. And somehow, none of it seemed even a little bit strange. Annie scrambled to her feet and offered me a hand up. I took it. "You came," she said. "I didn't think you would." Somehow it made perfect sense to me. She had been calling for me all night, like a wolf calling its pack. "Of course I came," I said. "You're my best friend." She pulled me into another hug, all laughter gone now, and whispered into my chest, "I'm scared." The sudden need to protect her went through me like a shock. "What's wrong?" I asked. She shook her head and pulled away again. "It's not me I'm afraid for." I found I could read her body language as clearly as if she had spoken aloud. Her father had remarried quickly after the divorce. Annie had a half-sister, a little girl who would be close to 3 now. "I need your help," she said without speaking. "Let's go." She gently tugged my hand and turned to climb out of the creek towards the waiting wolves. And with that tug she peeled away the skin of the universe. It peeled away like cheap paint, and underneath it was a sky full of fierce, unfamiliar stars, all bathed in silver moonlight. She pulled me into the gap between realities, and it was like hunger, like nighttime, like running, like loneliness, like fear, all rolled into one. And then it wasn't me anymore, unless I had always been, deep down, a sleek gray wolf, and hadn't known it until now. My outer skin peeled away, and we sprang up the creek bed, shaking water out of our fur, greeting the others. And then we were running again, the whole pack, the dominant predators of the natural world. We flew through the miles, leaving the woods, and then the empty farmland behind us. The local farm dogs whimpered and cringed inside their yards as we passed. We reached the human-built highway, and we did not stop there as a wolf might, for we were also dominant species in this world, silent as thieves and bold as death. We walked down the empty city streets, and the streets were ours alone. Loose candy wrappers and leaves blew past our feet. Hours had passed since the last of the disguised humans had gone to bed. Halloween night had been deserted by people and left to the creatures of the night. It required human fingers to retrieve the key from its hiding place, and human hands to work the lock. But Annie flickered back long enough to open the door and let the pack in. There were 3 human heartbeats in the quiet house. 2 female, 1 male. 2 adults, 1 child. The sense of dry blood and perpetual fear were there as well, and bruises artfully concealed. A half-dozen wolves crowded into the living room, sniffing at the sofas and the rugs, and took note of all of this. Annie nosed open the bedroom door first, her old one. Its new occupant was awake and started in fear when the door first moved. And then, heartbreakingly, she relaxed when she saw we were not the monsters she had been expecting. Annie nuzzled the small child. This precious morsel of life and her baby sister sunk her hands into soft, warm canine fur. Annie held that pose for hours, it seemed, silent moonlight washing over them both. until the smaller heartbeat steadied, and peaceful security relaxed her features. She slept, and Annie took human form one more time to smooth back the girl's hair and tuck in her covers. She kept her face turned away from us as she changed back, but I could sense the dampness in her eye anyway. The wolf once more. She led us into the second bedroom. No one was awake there. 6 silent wolves padded in, occupying every inch of available carpet. The sleeper did not stir, even when Annie leapt into the bed and stood over him, looking into the face, making sure. One leg dangled free outside the safety of the covers. She sank her fangs deep into the calf and dragged him backward off the bed, dumping him into the center of the pack. His skull struck the floor with a crack. The screams were so brief. So many wolves were hardly necessary to dispatch just one brutish human, but it took only seconds to understand why Annie had brought us all. The pack had come not just to kill, but also to feed. 6 empty, carnivorous stomachs, red flecked muzzles, shoving each other aside, jockeying for the best positions. Annie had made sure that there would be no evidence left behind at the scene of the crime. Something human in me hung back, cringing. But Annie tore a piece loose and, with a snap of her neck, threw it my way. There wasn't anything that girl could toss at me that I wouldn't take a bite of. You're not you when you're hungry. There wasn't anything that girl could toss at me that I wouldn't take a bite of. You're not you when you're hungry.